Welcome back to episode 2 of Train, Perform, Recover. My name's Jake Watson.
And my name is Jacob Carter, and today we're going to give you 3 ways to improve your lower back pain.
JHC Beats.
So to set some ground rules today, we're going to chat about mechanical lower back pain. And this means that we're not going to chat about fractures, arthritis, radiating nerve pain, or compression of the spinal cord. And mainly, we're not going to do that because delving into these other issues in detail really should have a proper assessment before providing general recommendations. All that being said, the principles that we will discuss today are clinically helpful in improving almost all non-emergent types of lower back pain.
There are certain areas of our body that are prone to developing limitations in range of motion or mobility. Here is a few suggestions that may help improve our restrictions. First, we'd look at rolling the thoracic spine out. So what would we do? We'd place a foam roller across your mid-back, about shoulder blade level. Place your hands behind your head and keep your butt on the floor there. Here we're trying to roll 1 or 2 inches, just getting a little pressure and then arching back through that thoracic extension, seeing if this is feeling any kind of discomfort, any limitations in movement. We're then going to be staying around those areas of limitation or those areas that are lacking movement and using that method to try and open that thoracic spine up. The second test we'd look at is external rotation through the hips. So the pigeon pose or piriformis stretch, left versus right, to see if there's any kind of differences between the sensitivity from left and right, placing a ball in that left hip, placing a ball in the right hip, seeing if there's any kind of tightness from one side to another. Generally, if you find that there's a lower left back pain, you'll more or less find that about 80% of the time that left side will also be tight through that hip there, so around that glute and the piriformis area. So that's the kind of region or exercise you want to do to open up that part of the hip. The last one that we might focus on here is your hip flexors. So looking to a hip flexor stretch, left side versus right side, getting a softball again into those areas, comparing left and right. Does one feel tighter than the other? And if so, work on this too.
So the second way that we can look at improving your lower back pain is by improving how well your muscles coordinate movement. So muscle coordination refers to how muscles work together. And when we plan to move in a certain way, for example, if we want to do a push-up, our brain determines in advance how we need to contract our muscles so we don't fall right on our face. And the brain comes up with this program that looks at which muscles it needs to contract, and then when the muscles must contract and how much intensity the muscles must contract with. It's a pretty complex program that must be created quickly, and it helps us to perform well and reduce our risk of injury. One of the byproducts of feeling pain is that our brain makes us coordinate our muscles much more poorly. In the back, this could be experienced in the form of a muscle spasm. If we ever want to return to a state of normalcy, we have to relearn how to move both through basic and complex ways. So next, Jake's going to talk us through a few ways to work on muscle coordination. And most of these are fairly basic ways. So here we go. Jake, tell us a few basic ways how to improve our muscle coordination.
The first one would be looking at how well you breathe with your diaphragm. Now, so the diaphragm is a muscle that helps create spinal stability. It just sits underneath your rib cage, kind of looks similar to an umbrella spanning under from your sternum and your lower ribs and attaching into your lumbar spine. It increases intra-abdominal pressure as a means of providing stability through that spine. So contracting that or breathing down into there will increase that intra-abdominal pressure and put a bit more support around that lumbar spine. If we're working with clients, I tend to look at starting off with something like block breathing through a diaphragmatic breathing model. So you'd be lying down on your back, placing your hands just below your rib cage here and trying to breathe into your hands on a count of 4. being 4 seconds to breathe in, hold for 4 seconds, 4 seconds to breathe out, hold for 4 seconds, and keep cycling through that 4-second blocks of breathing. Getting a grasp of how to do this in the diaphragmatic breathing will kind of assist later on when you're progressing towards lifting loads and increasing this intra-abdominal pressure. So that would be through a load like picking up a child off the floor or performing a deadlift and increasing that abdominal pressure around there to support the spine. The second motor coordination or muscle coordination we want to improve is that of spinal flexion, extension, and side flexion as well. So it's important that we're able to move through the segments of the spine, flex, extend, laterally flex. In our spine, there's very small muscles that allow us to control each of these vertebrae movements in relation to the vertebrae above it and the vertebrae below it. And it's ideal that we have control of these independent joints, because if we don't, it can compromise our ability to find the best spinal position to achieve certain movements. So exercises that will help with this would be the simple cat and cow. Good place to start for segmenting your spine through flexion and extension. And for a lateral flexion would be same position on all fours, just trying to bring your ear or shoulder towards that side of the hip and bring the other side together to try and bring a bit of lateral flexion. The third exercise that I'd probably choose for muscle coordination would be looking at exercises that help with allowing movement through the hip, but restrict movement through the spine. So this is to kind of enforce the ability to move your hips without compensating with spinal movement. So we're locking down that stability through the lower spine especially, and getting that articulation through the pelvis with the femur there. Examples could be your fire hydrant, your bird dog, dead bug, a glute bridge, or a hip hinge as a means of trying to address that kind of movement and coordination.
So far, we've gone through assessing and giving a couple of treatment options for mobility restrictions, and that might be with stretching or using a foam roller or a hard ball. And then we've also gone through and looked at some different basic coordination drills, trying to see maybe there's some positions that you're a little bit shaky in or that just don't feel very natural for you to do. And if you feel like you've gotten some confidence through those exercises, we're moving into now looking at a way of improving spinal strength and stability. And the muscles around our core unit, they are essentially anti-movers. And what I mean by that is we might see traditionally that people would train their rectus abdominis in the front by doing tons of different crunch variations, spinal flexion variation, for example, or maybe we'd see people in the gym and they're lying over top of a bench and they're trying to extend through their spine to get some strength through the rectus spinae. That's more of a traditional or old school philosophy. Where we've moved to over the last at least 10 or 15 years now is trying to train our core musculature as anti-movers, meaning that we're maintaining a certain position while forces are trying to push us out of that position. So an example could be that we're on the ground in a side plank and gravity wants to make my body sag towards the ground, and I'm using the muscles on the ceiling side of my body to try to keep me up, or the glute on the side that's on the floor trying to keep me up into that position. Or a front plank, I'm trying to maintain that certain position without letting my body, my stomach and my abdomen arch towards the ground. We can train our body in 3 different positions. And those positions from a scientific perspective would be called a sagittal, a frontal, and a transverse plane. We can teach our bodies to resist forces in those different directions. And Jake's going to run us through a few different examples here of how to do that and different tests to look at the strength that we have in those different positions.
Yeah, definitely. So these exercises aren't obviously like the gold standard. These are ones that I'd maybe refer to if I had someone with this kind of mechanical lower back pain as a starting point, and then just potential grabs of intermediate and then harder skills. What we're doing, obviously, what you said there is trying to ensure that we're testing all those planes of instability, be it through that sagittal, frontal, and transverse. So through a sagittal plane, we might start off with something like the McGill curl-up off his McGill Big Three, which people may have heard of for some of these stability exercises. That's going to be an anti-extender as a beginning position. Then I might progress it to something like a modified ab rollout, or using an ab wheel where we're only going in the all fours position and rolling out slightly to disturb the center of gravity, and again try and bring about an anti-extension moan. And then something that might be more advanced would be like a glute ham raise machine. When you're sitting there and you see people that used to do the whole full-on sit-up through there, you're just going back and almost doing like a plank, but in reverse, like holding yourself in the parallel and then coming back up out of that or resisting that position. With a frontal plane, so this is looking at that lateral aspect. So you'd mentioned the side plank's a great start. You could work that in a bent knee position or a full side plank on the elbow or hand. Progressing towards something like a one-arm farmer's walk or farmer's carry, so just placing a lot of weight or just changing the weight there or load on one side and going for a slow walk there to try and resist that lateral tilt, and then maybe progress it to something like a Copenhagen plank there, which is a bit more advanced from that lateral stability. The last one there for a transverse plane, a more rotational aspect, we'd start off with something like a bird dog, trying to make sure that we're not getting any kind of change in the spine from a rotational point of view. You progress that maybe to something more intermediate, being a plank and shoulder tap or a renegade row. And then progressing on from there would be going into your Pallof press stance. So if you notice that it's much harder to perform an exercise in one of these particular planes compared to another, you might want to double down on that exercise. And that's what we normally do in the clinic there. That means that we bring about more volume and train that exercise or that plane of instability maybe multiple times in a program in a week to try and improve that skill set. Then if the exercises are getting easier, we need to increase the difficulty, and we can do this by increasing either the time, the load, offsetting our center of gravity, or reducing the base of support as a means of trying to make it a bit more complex. That's usually how I'd go about trying to progress these exercises.
Today we tried to take a complex topic that would normally be a challenging assessment in itself if you were to come into a clinic, and simplify it into 3 different ways for you to look at assessing and improving your lower back pain. The low-hanging fruit is to improve the mobility of your tight muscles and joints through rolling and stretching. You can get a lot of relief this way, or if your back pain is non-mechanical in nature, you should be able to get a lot of relief this way. The second stage is to add exercises that improve your muscle coordination to both your spine and your hip control. And these exercises may not feel incredibly hard, but really work to slow them down. You shouldn't be breaking a sweat doing most of these exercises. These are there for a mental control-based challenge. So yeah, slow them down, take some breaks if needed, make sure that you're mentally focused on the exercise, because it's not a physically hard exercise. They are not physically hard exercises. And then lastly, once you're starting to feel some improvement in your level of pain and function, you should start adding exercises in that challenge you in various movement planes. So those 9 exercises that Jake just discussed.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. That's a good little kind of concise resource for people to look at from a lower back pain standpoint. So we hope that you enjoyed our video today. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave anything in the comments below. If you found the information valuable, like our video and share it with your friends. And we'll leave some information in the description about exercises we've talked about today.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.